Hello and welcome to the MMQB podcast. I'm Conor. Albert Breer is here. I am riding high, Albert, after a big Black Knights victory over the weekend. We beat North Tech. I was there 2 weeks ago at Air Force. I'm all in. And they beat North Texas this past Saturday. On the strength of a 21-play, 95-yard drive that lasted almost 14 minutes. How good is Army college football? I absolutely love 21 plays, 95 yards, almost 14 minutes of game clock. That's insane.
That's incredible. That's
so
awesome.
Good.
That sounds like a. That sounds like like something that would happen in the dual county league that was dominated by wing T offenses back in the 90s. So I love it. I love it.
It's so good.
It's so cool to watch too. Like when you see those types of offenses, like how hard it is to defend. You know what I mean? Like and how these like teams with great athletes, even like the best teams in the country, can play them and like look out of sorts for a little while, you know, because of how different what they're doing is. So I actually got to go to West Point for work maybe a little over 10 years ago when the NFL was doing something on traumatic brain injury with the armed forces, and they had Goodell there, and they had like I can't remember who the 5-star general that they had there was, but it was so I got to spend like a day there, and it is an incredible place.
Yeah, really cool, really special. So I'm fired up. We're all in on Army, and other than that, Albert, great weekend. Except now my fantasy season hanging in the balance. We're about 10 hours away from Monday Night Football kickoff, and I need 28 points combined between Tua Tagovailoa and Cooper Kupp.
Possible, right? Possible.
Or else we kiss the season goodbye. Our CBS matrix gives me a 43% chance of winning, but we'll get to the Lions because they're going to lead off our rundown.
I'm down to 2%, just so you know.
But you're down to a 2% chance of winning?
Yeah, so I don't know, but all my people have played, and my opponent has Cooper Kupp, Jonnu Smith, and Cooper Kupp and Jonnu Smith going. So I don't know exactly how, and they're up by 7 or 9. So I don't know where that 2% comes from.
I do think that sometimes, like,
I guess you could have negative points, right? If like Jonnu Smith had like 4 fumbles or something like that.
Yeah, but like it's not even a 2% chance that's going to happen. We always joke that like the CBS scoring system in the league that I've been doing, we've been using the CBS league. I guess this league has been going on since like 2000, right? And I just happened to join a couple years ago, and the older people in the league are just accustomed to it, and so they're not going to switch from CBS. No one understands the quarterback scoring matrix, and so there will be games when your quarterback will have like 4 touchdowns and like 320 yards, and he'll have like 9 points. And you just don't, like, you just wake up and that's what it is. Like, that's what the computer decides. So I was playing Jared Goff in this league, and I'm like, awesome. He threw 5 interceptions. There's no way that this guy is going to have positive points. He somehow has 7 points. Like, you threw 5 interceptions. You should not have positive points. Yeah. Like, how do you have
recount?
I mean, I don't even know who to talk to about this. Like, it's really, probably like a real election. Like, I don't know, I don't know where this stuff goes. I don't know who's counting it. I don't know what's happening. I'm pretty bummed about this. But yes,
sorry to hear that.
If you work for CBS Fantasy Sports, if you're the guy who actually decides this, because I've looked at the scoring system 100 times, I still don't know why everything is the way that it is. Maybe you can explain to me why Jared Goff has positive points despite the fact that he threw 5 interceptions. So let's get into that game as we start our recap of the week that was. This game was wild, Albert. The Lions beat the Texans 26-13. You heard me right. Jared Goff had 5 interceptions in about 36 minutes of game time, a 29 quarterback rating after nearly setting the NFL record for most 140 plus game quarterback rating games. I mean, where do you even start here? Houston went into the half up 23-7, and then the Lions scored 19 unanswered points. Yeah. They finished with a game-winning field goal that I like that Chris Collinsworth said if you put an extra coat of paint on the goalpost, it wouldn't have gone in.
And here I was thinking that Conor Orr only picked the Lions to win the Super Bowl because he spent some time with them in the offseason. My bad, Conor.
No, that's right. I believe, and we have, this is why we have stuff like power rankings, right? I have the Chiefs at number 2. I have the Lions at number 1 because unless this team gets totally exhausted, which is possible. We saw this happen with the Eagles last year where you had big emotional win. And they were
coming off of coming close the year before. Same way the Lions are coming off of coming close the year before.
And all of a sudden it just hits, right? You hit that emotional block. Everybody starts making mistakes you can't recover from. But what is this Lions team not going to come back from? A 5-interception game, a game where your best player breaks his leg, a game where your defensive signal caller gets thrown out in the second quarter for a BS helmet-to-helmet call. Like, all of these things keep happening, and the Lions, like... It's not just finding a way. It's like there are drives where they're just ripping people's faces off.
Yep, and I think like you see like their best players keep getting better. Like I think Brian Branch is a great example of that. It's like he's a little bit better every week and he's already really good. You know what I mean? Like it's just he keeps showing up. And after what happened last week, which I think a lot of people would say was BS, he comes back and he was all over the place last night. Jahmyr Gibbs, Aleem McNeil, you can just keep going down the list of guys that they have that keep showing up in the biggest ways. And it's a resilient team. It's a tough team. I think and I've said this a few times, I think what's so impressive about it is like, how many times have we seen a head coach and general manager tell you exactly what they were going to build, like at their press conference when they were introduced, and it became exactly that. That's what I feel like watching like the Lions. Like they can be what they need to be in the running game with Gibbs and Montgomery. They can be what they need to be on the outside with the contrast of St. Brown and Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta. They can be what they need to be on defense with all of these pieces that they can move inside and out and all over the place. The secondary is full of guys that can play multiple positions. Terry and Arnold, who they drafted to be, eventually their number 1 corner. Like he's a guy who's played a lot of safety. Brian Branch is a safety who's played a lot of corner. I think what it is, Conor, is like that team just has answers for freaking everything.
Yeah. And here's the biggest one that...
And they have the foundation on the lines of scrimmage, which I think is like, it's not sexy to talk about that, but, that's why the Eagles have been so good for so long. You know what I mean? Like the sustained success of the Eagles with the revolving door quarterback and all of the different players and coaches they've had in there. They've just been really good on the offensive and defensive lines for a very, very long time, which is why they've been competitive for so long. And that same sort of foundation, I think, is 100% what the Lions are built around.
We're getting into lost hope season for a lot of franchises, so I want to bring this up because we talk a lot about Ben Johnson, and then I think it gets lost in the fold, but I want it to come back for 1 second, and Aaron Glenn, both guys who are going to be head coaches next year, should they choose, which is now an important asterisk that I've learned that you have to add with Ben, because you don't know if he's going to take a job or not. But look at this last night. So Jared Goff goes into the first half, goes into the tunnel at halftime, 33.3 passing success rate, 5.4 yards per attempt, 41.2% completion percentage, and it's taking him almost 3 seconds a pass to throw the ball. He comes out of halftime, doubles his success rate. His completion percentage goes up 20%. His average time to throw goes down from 3 seconds to 2.5 seconds. And all of a sudden, the pressure on him almost disappears. He was under pressure a lot during the first half, almost none in the second half. That's coaching, right? That's the guy pulling the lever and saying, okay, I see what they're doing. Let's calm down. Doesn't matter that you've thrown a bunch of picks. Let's go figure this out and win the game. Unbelievable coaching performance against a really good Texans defense.
And on the flip side, Aaron Glenn's defense, no points, 2 turnovers in the second half. And we're all going to talk about the field goals and Goff and the offense coming alive in the second half. But none of that can happen unless the defense plays the way that it did. And, I did this in the column this morning, and this is another thing I think Dan Campbell deserves a lot of credit for, is like sticking with Aaron Glenn the way that he did. Because if you remember 2 years ago at this time, there were a lot of calls for Aaron Glenn's head, right?
They let go of Aubrey Pleasant in the middle of the season too, right?
Yep. Yeah, and if you remember the year before, right? Like the year before, they let go of Anthony Lynn as their offensive coordinator in the middle of the year, which eventually precipitated Ben Johnson becoming the play caller and the coordinator. And, I think Dan had like just a good sense. Like, obviously, that's a guy he really respects. I believe he played with Anthony Lynn way back. They at least coached together under Parcells. They at least were together under Parcells when Dan was still a player and Anthony was on that Cowboys staff. But he let go of a guy that he's pretty close to because it was the right thing for the team. And, he got a lot of credit for that. I think he should get similar credit for hanging on to Aaron Glenn the way that he did and having the sense to do that. Because 2 years ago, the Lions defense was awful. And, I had somebody there explain this to me where they said, we stuck with Aaron because we knew he was doing a good job and he was teaching well, and we weren't going to indict him for our own plan in building it. And when they got there and Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell went through the roster, what they determined was they were closer on offense. So they had to build a real strength of the team. So it's like, we feel like we've got an offensive line that's close. We got Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow already here. Like, how do we build on that? Well, we draft Penei Sewell. We bring in Jared Goff, who's a suitable successor to Matthew Stafford as the quarterback. They draft Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they were able to get that side of the ball up and running much faster. But that had to come at the cost of something. And it did come at the cost of building up the defense. And they sort of were more patient, and the defense was a slower build. And so I think the job, just the feel that Dan Campbell had for what they were trying to do and what they were trying to accomplish, and seeing past the amount of points the defense was giving up and knowing what sort of teacher and coach that Aaron Glenn was. The two were together in New Orleans, of course, before this. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that too, because he knew Aaron Glenn could be an excellent defensive coordinator without Glenn ever having been one before. And he knew he would grow into becoming one as they got him better players. And he stuck with him at a time when the team, I think, was 4-19 through their first 23 games under Campbell and Holmes, and the defense was really struggling. So I think Dan deserves a lot of credit for that, and AG's defense deserves a ton of credit for what happened last night, because the comeback, the field goals, the offense coming alive, that doesn't happen if the defense doesn't buckle down. By the way, still without its best player in Aiden Hutchinson.
Unbelievable.
It's like everything they do is right. It's just crazy. You know what I mean? Like they don't do anything wrong anymore. They get draft picks right. Like you see guys. I mean, it's like every little thing they do. Like even like Terrion Arnold. Like, and I know he's taken some hits for getting beat like early in the year, but I think he's getting better. Like they just get so many things right.
I mean, is this sustainable, or are we in this like week 10 haze where are we in a similar place that we were with like Philly last year?
No, I don't think so, because I think so. The way I look at Philly last year, Philly had a couple of factors that I think like maybe we overlooked at the time. One was the coordinator thing, that they had lost both their coordinators, and they lost both their coordinators late, if you remember. Like they lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon late. And as we can see now, those guys both wound up becoming pretty good head coaches. And as like the final result would show you, they whiffed on both coordinator hires, right? Because Brian Johnson's no longer there, and Sean Desai is no longer there. So that obviously is not a factor in Detroit with two coordinators that have been entrenched for a while. And I also think look, I think I think the Eagles did a lot to help Jalen Hurts schematically. And I don't think that's where Jared Goff is in his career. I think Jared Goff is in a place where in his career where it's not as much about just the scheme lifting him up. Like he's capable of producing different answers for different problems that are out there. And I don't know that Hurts was in that position last year. Plus the Eagles were aging on defense. They were ancient on defense. So those three things, I think the quarterback situation, the coordinator situation, and then the age on defense, the Lions are in a completely different spot than the Eagles were last year. Although I appreciate the idea because I do think that stuff can happen where a team kind of can maybe peak a little bit too early, which I think is what we would say about last year's Eagles.
Right? Are we all just assuming that the Bengals are really playing it the right way and then they're just going to get stupid hot on December 11th? And then
the Niners, they could be happening with the Niners, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Niners are kind of fun. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But all right, real quick before we move on, are you concerned at all about Houston at this point? And the reason that I'll say that is, yes, they have a lot of injuries, but I think 3 of Stroud's worst 4 games in terms of QBR have taken place over the last month. It's not been vintage Stroud, but it's also not been a vintage Texans offense either.
He's getting hit a lot. And I wonder, schematically, is the scheme moving forward as fast as it needs to?
Mm-hmm.
Are they doing enough things that are different than what they did last year? And, look, I think Bobby Slowick's a good coach, but where is that right now, right? And are they moving the ball forward the way, from a scheme standpoint, the way that Bobby's old boss in San Francisco would move it forward? I think a lot of those questions are on the table. CJ's getting hit way too much. That's part of it too. And for a line that they've invested so deeply in the interior, has really, really struggled. Shaq Mason's a veteran player who's probably on the back nine now, definitely on the back nine now. Juice Scruggs was a guy that they had high hopes for, who probably hasn't played quite up to expectations. And then Kenyon Green's out for the year. They've invested a lot into getting the offensive line right. And I think the tackles are still really good, Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard. But that interior group, what do you have right now? Where are you at right now with that interior group? I wonder if that part of it is fixable. Now it'll help to get Nico Collins back, I think for the most part, the defense is fine.
Yeah.
You go back to that Jets game and if Garrett Wilson doesn't make the Spider-Man catch, what are we talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right.
So I don't know that I've got and the defense played pretty well last night. I a couple of long ass field goals get the Lions to win. You know what I mean? I have trouble really killing their defense for what's happened the last few weeks. And I think the offense I am concerned about. I would be concerned about if I were the Texans.
I think we have to keep in mind that, we forget to parse what happened last year in a granular way. Last year, the Texans were outscored by the Colts. They were one loss away from a narrow loss away from the Colts making the playoffs instead of Houston. But what do we see, right? When we look back at last year, they made the playoffs. They kicked the crap out of the Browns in the first round, and they had the coach of the year, the executive of the year, the rookie of the 2 rookies of the year. They had the whole sweep. And so we're okay, automatic ascension, straight line to the top. You get Stephon Diggs and everything's good. That's not how the NFL works, right? And now we're seeing them hit that rough patch for the first time. It's time to see what happens. Now we figure out who the Texans are and what they got going for them. What is Underdog? Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Think Jalen Hurts will rack up higher than 200 passing yards next week? Justin Jefferson will get lower than 10 catches? Cook up some entries for a shot to win real cash prizes all football season long. They've got all your favorite teams and stars to choose from. Create entries with basketball picks or mix and match across all your favorite sports. Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em, so sign up now and deposit using promo code MMQB to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. I've heard from friends who love to pick their own players, their stat types. They love to text me and say, look at how much money I'm winning from Underdog. This is crazy. And they all say the same thing. It's super fun, super simple, and they all enjoy playing the game. So download the app today and use MMQB to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. You must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-800-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. Yesterday, I thought most entertaining game, obviously, Albert, that we all thought before the season. We were all circling this Commanders-Steelers matchup on our calendar. Couldn't wait. Believing that Russell Wilson was going to absolutely torch a Dan Quinn defense and throw for 3 touchdowns. I've given up on second guessing Mike Tomlin. I'm guessing you have too. This team is 7-2, 4-1 on the road. They handed the Commanders their first home loss of the season. I mean, George Pickens, 5 catches for 91 yards. Mike Williams, barely shows up, just got traded from the Jets, shows up, gets 1 catch, 1 target, 32 yards for a touchdown, deep ball touchdown from Russell Wilson. I mean,
so this is actually a pretty good nugget I picked up last night. That touchdown, they literally drew it up in the dirt. So So Calvin Austin, that ball, I believe, I wrote it this morning, but I believe that ball was designed to go to Calvin Austin. It's a stem go where you go, the receiver, kind of like leans inside and then breaks back outside towards the red line, right? Like, so, Austin comes out of the game and they have to move some things around. But they feel like that play is designed to get like Calvin Austin on the outside, a one-on-one, if there's like a 5-man pressure coming or there's a double team on Pickens on the other side. So Austin's not in the game. They put Mike Williams in, and legitimately like Russell Wilson like drew the route for Mike Williams up in the dirt and says, here's what you do. And that's why they wound up scoring a touchdown. And it was just turned into Mike Williams scoring on a one-on-one. Their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, was right that, the 5-man pressure came and created that one-on-one. And it's just like, feels like it's one of those teams now where like a lot of those sorts of things are starting to go right. You know what I mean? Like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Casey being right there to stop Zach Ertz. Like, how short was he of the line? It had to be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a team that's like, that seems to be in the right place at the right time a lot right now. And, Russell's opened up some things in the deep passing game for them, which is great. I think Russell surprised a lot of people, myself included. I know he's surprised some people internally by really buying into playing the same way he played in Seattle rather than having designs on it being something else. And, like his buy-in on like, I'm going to play the game like the Seahawks coaches had me play the game has been a huge part of this. there's just really good mojo there. I can't wait to see what it looks like against the Ravens next week.
Yeah. Do you remember when we were talking at the beginning of the season about, like, I remember getting pretty frothy at the mouth and saying like how BS it was that the NFL forced all of Pittsburgh's divisional games to the end of the season. And now if you're the Steelers, you're
they haven't played one yet, right?
And if you're the Steelers, you're like, yes, I get to play the Browns twice at the end of the season. Woohoo! Like, I mean, right now they're probably looking at it like we've already got 9 wins in the bank. Like we got to get 2 more, holy crap. Like they're going to be like the number 2 seed in the AFC. This is wild.
Yep. Yeah,
absolutely wild.
Yep. They get Jameis twice, or maybe DTR. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Oh man. On the Commanders front, listen. If this is worst in quotes, right? 68.5 quarterback rating, 36 total QBR for Jaden Daniels. If this is how it looks at its worst, 17 of 34, 202, no touchdowns, no picks. You take 3 sacks and you rush for only 5 yards.
Right.
I'll take it. Commanders put up 27 points. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Against the best defense in the league. Yeah. I mean, I don't walk away from this thinking any less of the Commanders. That said, this is kind of a gut check for them now, right?
Yep.
Like coming out of that, and now you have the Eagles on the road on a Thursday night. You're 7-3. They're 7-2. Like, I do think that this is the sort of gut check. Like, it's a very different type of gut check. But I thought like when the Commanders beat the Bears, like that was a gut check for the Bears. 'Cause how are you going to come out of that? Losing on the Hail Mary. And we've found out since how they've come out of it, which is not very good, right? But I do think that these sorts of losses can sometimes leave a mark and test kind of the strength of your locker room. And I think it will, because they have to turn around. And maybe it'll be to their benefit to have to turn around so quickly, but to play an important division game, that soon after losing that way in a tough physical game against one of the most physical teams in the league, it'll just be interesting to see where they're at on Thursday.
We go to, just to kind of put a bow on this, if I were to tell you that you got 2 rushing touchdowns out of this game against Pittsburgh, Terry McLaurin caught 113 receiving yards, 5 balls out of 6 targets. If you're Dan Quinn or Cliff Kingsbury, you take this any day of the week. I think it's any other team except for Pittsburgh at this point, which is just on an incredible heater. Special teams roller coaster here, but as long as I get Danny Smith on my television screen for the Steelers, that means it's a good week. Just chewing gum on the sidelines, the Steelers special teams coordinator, just absolute guy who loves ball. Probably my favorite part of every Sunday.
Danny Smith is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to switch the rundown around because I want to talk about another coach, Albert, that just totally loves ball and completely warmed my heart on Sunday. So the Falcons lose to the Saints 20-17.
Oh, man.
And we just get Riz ball from start to finish. And what's great about Darren Rizzi is he is the coach that... Like there's going to be a whole generation of kids that don't understand this, right? But it's like when you're in 4th grade and you sign up for your first football camp and you meet the varsity coach for the first time and he's hoarse and he's sweaty and he's just like, all right, everybody get into the gym, let's go. Like that guy is Darren Rizzi. And I just need to relay like 3 or 4 factoids to our listening audience, before we move into what happened to the game. Darren Rizzi, like maybe one of the biggest moments of his coaching career, comes to the podium afterwards and tells everybody that he clogged the toilet in the coach's bathroom before the game. He before the game's over.
You had me at hello.
Yeah, right? With like 30 seconds left in the game, him and Peyton Turner are shoving each other, and he gets hit so hard that he aggravates like a C6 vertebrae injury.
Got a stinger, right?
Yeah. So he can't feel his hand when he's walking off the field. So, and this is the third thing. I took it upon myself to do like a little investigative journalism here. After that happened, so I'm watching the post game. Someone had a camera on him after the game, and I don't know what player it was, but he's in full, like almost like a gunner. Arms full extended, shaking one of his players after the game. So at this point, his hand is numb, and he's physically shaking someone who's like 6'6", 300 pounds. Like, this guy needs to be a head coach permanently, like forever.
Oh. Well, so I'll go full disclosure here. I've known Rizzy a long time. Like, so he was a college teammate of a good friend of mine, and he actually coached two of my high school friends believe it or not, at the University of New Haven. He was the head coach there. So
wow,
I've known So I know Rizzy pretty well. Shout out to Brian Shea and Joe Bernotis, who I played high school football with, who went to the University of New Haven to play football. It was a Division II power back then. So like, I've sort of known about him, and he's been a head coach twice now too. He was a head coach at New Haven, and he was a head coach at Rhode Island. And my buddy Andy Gresh, who I've done radio with, who used to contribute to the MMQB podcast, so Gresh was an offensive lineman on the Rhode Island teams that Rizzy was a tight end on. And so, like, I think if you've spent like 30 seconds around Darren Rizzy, you could see where he could be a head coach. Now, that's without knowing, does he coach offense? Does he coach defense? Does he coach special teams? But he just has this like magnetism to him. And like, he's the guy who brought all the special teams coaches together and got the kickoff rule changed. Like, he's the guy who kind of captained all of that. And it's because he has these leadership qualities. And then you look and like, I'm telling you, like, anybody can do it. Just if you have like NFL Plus or whatever, like, so you can go back and you can look at the game broadcast, go back and like watch the last like minute and a half of that game and look at the guys in that sideline. Now, this is a team that came in 2-7, right? That's full of like aging veterans that had just got its head coach fired. And look at how happy those players are for him. You know, like, it's funny, like, to watch like Peyton Turner, deliver a stinger to him, right? But like, there's something real there too, right? And I talked to him after the game for about 15 minutes, and it was cool to talk to him about, like, the relationships he has with the players, and that was and he was like, that's the foundation of all of it, like, that's the foundation of all of it for me. He's like, and he felt really badly that DA got fired, and but, he said, like, the one advantage I have is that if you take an offensive coach and, put him in this role, he might not know half the roster. Same thing if you take a defensive coach and put him in this role, on an interim basis. It's like, I have relationships with everybody on the roster because everybody's had to work with me. He's like, even the quarterbacks, like, because he was handling the game management stuff for Dennis Allen. Like, he was working with Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler too. So that's what I think is like really cool about it, is that like so much of the energy of the team, I think, is based on the relationships that Rizzy's built there over the last 6 years, And he was a really popular figure in Miami too, under multiple head coaches, under Tony Sperano and Joe Philbin and Adam Gase. And I could just tell you this, like, just texting with people over the last, 24 hours, there are a ton of people in football that are so happy for him, And like, I think you can see that reflected in how his players reacted. So I'm not saying like that Rizzy's gonna win out and they're gonna go 10-7 and make the playoffs and he's gonna be the full-time head coach. But I'm not ruling anything out. Like, I think this is a guy who had head coaching qualities all along. And as a special teams coach, maybe it's always hard for those guys to get that shot, right? Like, but this guy does have a lot of like really, and I think other people who've been around him would tell you, like, okay, like, so, maybe he won't coach your quarterbacks or call your offense or whatever, but he does have a lot of head coach qualities.
Does someone like Antonio Pierce wreck it for everybody else? And I'll say
maybe.
This, like, and I feel like
But then again, do you think the Raiders regret walking away from Rich Bisaccia?
Well, that's the problem, right? Is like, and what kind of disappoints me about And I hate to put this all on one person, but like, and this Raiders team is bad, but Antonio Pierce has changed quarterbacks 4 times already.
Right.
The offensive staff got fired and, went from saying players are making business decisions. Like there's all these kind of, kind of some wacky 4th down decision making throughout. And I'm not saying he's got to be Bill Belichick day one, but you did that because you regretted not making Rich Bisaccia a full-time coach the last time. And so does this whole like whirlwind create a situation where it boxes someone out, but I don't know. We're a long way away from that.
But here's the thing though. Like I understand what you're saying, but I think a lot of Antonio Pierce's mistakes thus far, and we'll see if he gets one and done. I don't know, but I think a lot of his mistakes thus far have been born of inexperience. Like, this is not an inexperienced football coach. You know what I mean? Like, this is a career football coach. This is a guy who's been a head coach before twice, who's been in the NFL since, I think 2009. So he's got 15 years of experience in the league coaching, and then whatever it is, 30 years of experience coaching, period. Like, this is a guy who has, seen it from a lot of different angles, has seen it as a head coach. His experience in the pros is on special teams, but I mean, I guess this is like the example that everybody would view as the outlier. That was John Harbaugh too,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm always one for more special teams coaches. I believe in that because I do think that there's a void in, like, you keep getting the play caller, and there's a void and you see teams not doing as well at mastering the little things that special teams coordinators can do. How are you winning in the margins, the tiny rules, the little shifts that you can make during a game, roster management, all that kind of stuff. But again, we're in this sort of homogenous think tank.
I remember listening to Bill Belichick talk about this, and I'm sure you've heard that. Like he's talked about this a lot. I'm sure you've heard it, Connor. But for those who haven't, like Bill used to say, like, the best experience he got and being an assistant coach to become a head coach was as a special teams coach, because he had to manage the roster.
Yep.
And because it was like, okay, like I can use this guy here and here, but I can't use him there. It forced him to understand the whole game. It forced him to understand like a lot of the challenges that a head coach faces. It had forced him to understand his phase of the game in the context of everything, rather than having his head buried in a play sheet, only worried about what his next call is going to be, So, like, I do think that there's merit to it. I don't know. It is interesting if you think about it, though. Like, right? Like, just as a big picture thing. Like, why is it that one special teams coach got a head coaching job? Like, this millennium, we saw one special teams coach get this sort of get a guy who's primarily a special teams coach get a shot. And that guy, right, winds up being beyond a home run hire. John Harbaugh was a grand slam hire, right? And then in the time since then, only one other special teams coach has gotten a shot. That's Joe Judge, right? That's the only one. Yep. No one else has. So, like, it's kind of interesting. We look at all these trends. You got the ex-player trend, which is Dan Campbell, D'Amico, Vrabel, Kevin O'Connell. You've got the offensive play caller trend, which is the McVay, Shanahan, LaFleur, McDaniel, all those guys. It is interesting to think about, like, why didn't John Harbaugh, why didn't his success at least cause a few more guys to get their shot? Why didn't that happen? And I think, unfortunately, a big part of the reason why is shallow as a sink. You know what I mean? Because the owner can't sell it to a fan base.
Owners ruin everything, man. It's true.
Yep.
And it always has been. Let's talk about the Falcons for 1 second before we move on. I think that this is one of these situations where it's a tale of two halves for Kirk Cousins, and they kind of get themselves down in this game. Now, this is a huge aberration game. It's a big rivalry game, and the Saints hit on 2 massive Marquez Valdez-Scantling throws, like we all expected. They start the game with an almost 90-yard.
Who's like the only guy? He's the only receiver who dressed for the Saints that you've ever heard of.
Yeah, but. and they started the game with an almost 90-yard touchdown pass to Taysom Hill that was called back. So there's clearly some juice here. But with Atlanta, are we at all supposed to take pause in this? They have had fits and starts throughout the season, inconsistent defensive performances. Are you at all concerned about their long-term viability here?
No, I mean, they ran the ball well. It wasn't their day. Yeah. I think they sort of ran into a buzzsaw,
a rizsaw.
A rizsaw. Yeah, a rizsaw. I like that. But I think they did that. I think they ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw on a Saints team that, this is like, I mean, their season's on the line. They have that spark. I don't know. Like I tend to put this in the same category as the Commanders' loss. You know what I mean? Like where it's like,
sure,
a really good team with a really good first-year head coach that's done a lot of good, and here's a bump. You know what I mean? Like until it's more than that, I tend to think that the Falcons are going to be okay.
The San Francisco 49ers beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23-20. This was Christian McCaffrey's return, 13 carries for 39 yards, and then 6 catches for 68 yards, including this big 30-yarder on a wheel route at the end of the game that kind of breaks it wide open. Ricky Pearsall was kind of the standout for San Francisco in this one, 4 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. And Albert, I will give you your flowers on this one because while it's sort of an unimpressive victory on its face, I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still a really good team. They're 4-6, but this is like, they're down their top 3 wide receivers. It's basically the Cade Otton show right now in Tampa Bay. But Baker Mayfield is playing out of his mind trying to get these guys back into it. But you had said all along, and I jumped on this take as well, that this was going to be beneficial for Brock Purdy in the long run. And now we see a team that Who led the 49ers in receiving? Juwan Jennings, 7 catches for 93 yards. Had to play a lot when, in the preseason when Brandon Ayuk wasn't there.
And
when
Deebo Samuel was one of their best players in the Super Bowl too.
Right. Ricky Pearsall with a big game. Again, like guys that had to be forced to step up. And then centrally in this, Albert, is Brock Purdy, who now has all of the pocket navigation skills that he had to develop without Christian McCaffrey and with all these other guys. And now he has that in the offense that was always good, and I do think that while it's still, we have to smooth this out a little bit. What I saw on Sunday was a guy who was more confident, more calm, more in charge of the pocket, and not dependent on it being clean, not dependent on the ball getting out right on time. Like he's growing. And I think that attrition did force him to become the player that we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, in a way, and I talked to him after the game, and he had said to me, that it sort of taught him that how perfect things often could be and how to plan things could be when you had Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo and McCaffrey and Trent Williams, and they're all at the height of their powers, and how often things would go according to plan, and how you had to deal with how things look different when they aren't going according to plan. And I think he's had to adjust to that and to some degree learn what he can and can't get away with again, as an NFL player. He's a good athlete, so he can make things happen off schedule. But the same way it would be for a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, which those guys obviously are different types of athletes for sure. But learning what you can get away with and what you can't. I think you saw a lot of the things he was doing off schedule. And you see him learning that, right? So it's making the throw to McCaffrey down the sideline. That wasn't necessarily off schedule, but that was trusting that would be there, right? And he's taken a massive hit from William Golson on that one. And basically threw that ball from his back to his spot. There was the scramble play to Kittle where he throws the ball to the corner of the end zone. And that's, again, throwing it to his spot and making something happen and buying time. And so I think your point's a great one, that it's learning how to play when things aren't perfect. And it's a great window for the Niners into what this might look like in 2 or 3 years, when they have to rebuild it and when he is paid. And so how much are we comfortable paying him? What are we comfortable doing with him when everything isn't just like Kyle drew it up on a Wednesday, right? Well, we got to see that over the first half of the year. And so not only does it give you that window into what it's going to look like down the line, I think it also is going to make them better when they are at full strength and they're getting closer now. You're getting closer to where it is what they envision. Now Ayuk's not coming back, but I think the rest of it could wind up looking pretty good. And for all the epitaphs written on the Niners over the last few weeks, they are only one game behind last year's pace through 9 games. They are even with where they were in 2022, and they are one game ahead of where they were in 2021. And all 3 of those years, they wound up at least in the NFC title game.
I think big credit too goes to Deebo Samuel. When you find your team lacking in effort, what you want to do is you want to grab the holder of your field goal team by the neck and then slap your kicker in the head. All in one fell swoop. It was
but they had to survive the kicker thing too, which I think shows some resilience, right? No, seriously though, a lot of teams you miss 3 field goals in a game, and all due respect to Jake Moody, there was one that was pretty long, but it's not like in today's game those are unmakeable, right? He missed what, a 44-yarder, a 50-yarder, and a 49-yarder. Those aren't crazy field goals. You wouldn't expect that the guy's going to miss all 3 of them, and he does. And so, they're able to get him another shot, which I think, shows some mental toughness and resilience too.
Yeah. Whatever. You could say that's setting the standard. Shelby luckily doesn't hit us when we have to retape something or, when we're a little bit late.
You can hear his displeasure though.
That's for sure. But he has never physically grabbed me by the neck. I'm sure he's wanted to. But
maybe that's just because he's not in proximity to do it.
That's true. Every team operates a little differently. But on the Bucs front, so I just thinking about this team and where they go from here. The Falcons loss helps because, just to try to keep them back into this, even though the Falcons, they have a clean sweep. They lost to Atlanta both times. So I just want to alert everybody to the fact that Tampa Bay has New York, Carolina, and Las Vegas coming up here, and they're 4-6. Would it really surprise you if they're 7-6 and getting a full complement of healthy players back? They have Dallas and Carolina and New Orleans to end the season. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, ready to call this division right now.
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at their schedule, and that was sort of the point that a couple of their guys made to me was if we can just split the Kansas City San Francisco turn, we'll be okay. Now, they weren't able to do that, but I think part of the point there was what's ahead is pretty manageable. Man, the toughest team on this schedule is the Chargers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the Falcons, they still have a Vikings game left. They have a Commanders game left that's potentially flexed. And so I don't know. I'm just saying.
I think which is why having that season sweep at the Bucs in your back pocket is probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's
an extra game in the standings for you.
Yeah. All right. So Chiefs Broncos, Albert, just like everyone thought. When you get into it, Sean
it's just
Payton's
stupid at this point, isn't it? It's just it's silly what's going on now at this point.
So I like it because. One of the things
it's great. It's great drama. It's unbelievable drama.
Yeah. And so that's perfectly in line with my point. So I have friends who are fully on the NFL is fixed, bandwagon, and, they send me these crudely compiled videos of grainy footage from the game. And they just kept saying oh man, the Broncos.
So are they accusing the guard on the Broncos field goal team of throwing the game?
Correct. They were look, he doesn't even move. The NFL is fixed. And I was he doesn't move because he's afraid that if he jumps off sides, then Sean Payton's going to bite his neck off on the sidelines. That's why he doesn't move. And then the second component to that is it looks like he doesn't move, but Kansas City has Leo Chenal, all these linebackers, George Karlaftis, like all these hybrid players are so incredibly athletic. Like they've built this team full of these guys, you know?
I thought, so I talked to Leo Chanel last night. I feel like I'm name dropping a lot here. I'm sorry.
This is what people want, Albert.
There is a point to it, but
yes.
So he brought up an interesting point to me. I asked him like how this keeps happening, right? Which like is a stupid surface question, whatever. But he brought up a good point. He said like, you know, when you get in these situations where you're in field goal block or whatever, if you put like with a lot of teams, if you put starters out there, you'll see on the tape like the starters are kind of going and half-assing it, right? And like there's like not full effort, or you have backups in there who just can't physically get the job done the same way the starters can. And he's like, but for us, he's like, if go and watch our field goal block team, and he's like, I guess he told me he got a finger on an extra point earlier in the game, and like they almost got another one after that. So this wasn't a fluke. And he was like, when you have starters out there on the field goal block team and they're going full speed, that's just culture, you know. Like when that sort of thing is happening with these players who are gassed from playing a full boat of snaps on offense or defense, like, and they're playing that hard on special teams, like that's culture. Like that's why this is what it is. And he's like, we didn't quite get the field goal earlier, the extra point earlier, but you know what? Like if we keep playing that hard, eventually we're going to get one, and we got one. And I thought it was like a great lesson for like winning on the margins and what that place is all about. And, you know, the fact that they're willing to put starters out there. Like Steve Spagnuolo signs off on Leo Chenal and George Karlaftis playing on the field goal block team, right? Not everybody's willing to do that. It's I think we can all joke about how like lucky they are or what, but and there is like a horseshoe up their ass element to some of this, but you know, I think 2 weeks in a row now we've seen like a team that like just has a way of summoning what it needs to summon at the end of the game, and I think a big part of that is, you know, what was witnessed for 20 years in New England, which is just a cultural standard that produces these sorts of plays at the end of games.
You're right. I don't know.
By the way, I do want to mention this. They're only six wins away from the NFL record for a winning streak. Okay, you want to hear what they have coming up? You tell. Okay, so if they get by, Buffalo's obviously a challenge, right? So Buffalo would be 16. Panthers would be 17. Raiders would be 18. Chargers would be 19. Browns would be 20. And then they would be playing to match the record on the Saturday before Christmas.
Oh, here we go. Okay, now I believe
Houston.
Now I believe the NFL's fixed again.
And then break the record.
Yep, now I believe the NFL's fixed again.
on Christmas Day.
They're going to break the record on Christmas Day, and Taylor Swift drops a new album at the same time as the Hallmark movie comes out, and then oh man. Now I believe it again. Oh my God. Are you serious?
That? I'm not kidding. They would break the record on Christmas Day in Pittsburgh.
That can't happen. That can't happen. And it would be like the Steelers would be like 10-2 at that point, you know, or whatever it is, right?
Oh, and we'll put up a massive rating, and then the NFL could turn around and sell that Christmas package next year for $1 billion.
Albert, maybe it is fixed.
Connor's mind is. I just turned Conor without even intending to.
What do you call like? This is an apolitical statement, but they call like a red pilling is when somebody turns to the Republican side. What do you call someone who? What color pill is it now that I believe that the NFL is fixed? I've been
shield pilled. I don't know.
I've been shield pilled. I've been red, white, and blue pilled. All right. Yeah. Boy, I don't know.
You've been Goodelled.
I've been Goodelled. Producer Shelby said, Casey Masterpiece pilled. I've been sauced. I've been barbecue sauced.
You got sauced. Yeah, you got sauced.
Sauced and tossed. Move this one up in the rundown too. sometimes when you're just a little low on juice, you want to talk Jets. I don't know. It just gets me uniquely fired up. But I will say this: like, we're done just destroying this team because this performance is pathetic on Sunday. And so I think it's time to really start highlighting the Cardinals. And
have they quit?
What's that? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like from the minute that James Conor takes that first touchdown in, it's just arm tackle, guys laying down, guys falling down, and it's just the whole thing is stunning from top down. And I don't know if the shockwave started when Woody Johnson fired Robert Saleh. I don't know if there's something that Aaron Rodgers is not doing. I mean, Davante Adams spoke up and they talked about this team meeting that he had, this speech, and he was there for like 4 days. Like, who's holding anybody accountable at this point? Like, who's trying to fix it? And I feel bad. I feel bad for a lot of people there. I feel bad for Jeff Ulbrich, who probably would have been a head coaching candidate this cycle if, Robert Saleh had stayed the head coach. The team had probably chipped their way close to the playoffs, and then he gets to lead his own team under normal circumstances. But this is a disaster.
I mean, and this to me kind of underscores what we talked about after it happened, which is, what was the point of firing Saleh? Like, I understand, I understand, like his record wasn't great. At the time, they were 2-3, and we had seen them peak a little bit, and they were going into a game against Buffalo on a Monday night to play to take the division lead. And the strength of the team was the defense, and so you're removing the architect of the defense, and then taking the defensive coordinator and stretching him thin. Like, on what planet does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Planet Woody. It's I don't know. I mean, obviously there are only 32 of them, so they're going to find somebody to take that job. But that was I've said this before, like Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas were warned about what this job could become before they took them. And, obviously they felt like they had things in the right place. Both those guys were hired by Christopher, not Woody. And, there's a lot of different elements to why you would wind up accepting the job. And, part of it's your belief in yourself, and that most jobs that come open are broken in some way. But, if the warning signs were there then, and now you've gone through what you've gone through, I mean, man, that's going to be tough to sell somebody who has options on that job. Either of those jobs.
Let's just play this forward for a second. Let's imagine that the string runs out on this season. They finish with 4 wins, 5 wins at this point. If they're really fortunate,
they're worse right now than they were last year. At this point,
way worse. Isn't
that crazy? But think about that. They had a scarecrow at quarterback at this point last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were better than they are right now.
So do you try to bring Aaron Rodgers back? Do you hope that he comes back? Do you even want him back? Do you bring Davante Adams back? What are you doing with these short-term contracts on the offensive line? Are you burning this all down and hoping that Woody stays overseas long enough to let it kind of materialize? I think the obvious play right now, this is my opinion, the obvious play right now would be to go and hire Deion Sanders.
Yeah. We get a lot of headlines then for sure, which the Jets have been rightfully accused of trying to get headlines in the past. So, I think the right thing to do, the one thing you do have there is a decent young core. So I think if it's me, I'm going, and I think they're going to blow the whole thing up. So I think that's sort of a foregone conclusion now that Woody is going to implode the whole thing. Whether it's Woody or Christopher pushing the button, we'll see. And I think at that point, you you clean out the roster except for like this young core of players that you have. And so, I think you're building around Sauce Gardner, Olufoshanu, Quinnen Williams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. Like, that's
Will
the thing
McDonald.
about it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it, Connor. Jermaine Johnson maybe coming back off the Achilles. Like, that's the thing about it is, like, they've actually done a pretty decent job drafting and developing these young guys. So the one saving grace they have as far as attracting somebody to the job is someone's going to look at that roster and say, like, I can definitely work with that. And yeah, there's a void at quarterback, but like there's a good nucleus of young players that we can really work with, The problem is, like, your resources are going to be limited to do that, to some degree, because I think in detonating the cap, you're probably going to, tie yourself down for a year, and you have offloaded some draft picks. So, but I do think, like, if you're the Jets, like, the path out of this is to go in on the young guys and maybe seek this is going to sound funny, Sam Darnold type of solution at quarterback for the time being, assuming Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back.
You bring him back with like a cake and just be like, "Sorry, dude."
How about this? How about this? Have a Jets alumni club reunion with some of your moves in the offseason. Hire Josh McCown as the head coach, and then bring in Sam Darnold to be the quarterback.
I'm sure. I'm guessing that Josh McCown, whenever he gets his head coaching job, would probably stay far away from that place.
The band is back together.
I mean, so
Tebow is a team chaplain.
What could you do? Like Justin, maybe like Justin. It'd be like a fun combo for this team is like Justin Fields and like Todd Monken. Todd Monken is like a head coach, and
they actually
Justin
really
Fields.
liked Monken when they hired Gase. Like, there were people in that building who wanted them to go with Monken. So I think there's some Monken love in that place.
Just saying, maybe something like that. Where you can, the offense will at least be halfway decent. What are some other good Baker-esque, Geno-esque? I mean,
who would be the next one?
Yeah, who could be the next one? Like, Justin Fields is obviously one. Like, I mean, Russell Wilson at this point is playing like he's going to keep the job. Not Jameis. Jameis in New York would be too, like, that would be insane.
Explosive.
You can't, like, you just can't do that. That should not be allowed.
It sounds like you're saying that in a way where you hope it happens. That should not be allowed.
No. I'm 100% saying it because, like, I do think that some teams, the Jets,
like, you're hoping. I'm saying you're hoping it happens for entertainment purposes.
No, because my thought on this is that some teams have gotten, and the Jets leading the charge, have become such a fantasy world wrestling type, like, just look at me franchise that it does undermine, like, that this is a game, but for those of us who cover it, like, you want there to be this element of, like, seriousness and, like, there to be this true genius behind it, and you don't want it to devolve into, like, this, cacophony of fart sounds, and that's really what the Jets have been. And if you lean into that, I don't know, it just kind of undermines. I don't know. I like what I do for a living.
How about old Daniel Jones coming up I-78 to Florham Park?
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, what you could do? Daniel Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Carson Wentz, after his rehab year in Kansas City. I don't know. Who else do we got? Andy Dalton. I'm looking at is Trey Lance even developable at this point? I don't know. I mean, the Cowboys aren't even trying.
Yeah, the Trey Lance thing doesn't look great when, like, they're in the situation they're in yesterday and they really didn't turn to him until the game was over. Not great.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know. Joe Flacco. Who knows, right?
Yeah, the ultimate reclamation project.
I promised you notes on Arizona, and here we go. The Cardinals are 6-4 at this point. They're in first place in one of the toughest divisions in football. I mean, across the board, just another phenomenal game. I mean, Budda Baker is an all-pro. You had so many guys getting in on the action last night.
James Conor has been like has been a stud for them. Like they've hit on draft picks. Paris Johnson and Marvin Harrison look really great.
You had guys like, Jesse Luketa with 2 quarterback hits yesterday. You had 6 different guys who broke up passes. All these things are, and
Kyler looks really good.
And Kyler looks super comfortable. Drew Petzing has gone from, in my opinion, like one of these guys it's like, okay, like maybe if the interview process goes right to like, he's not going to be there next year. Like, I think he's going to get a head coach.
He might not. Yeah. Yeah. He's really, really sharp.
Yeah. And I think this whole thing just looks really good. And hey, I'll wear egg on my face. I thought this team needed to tank. I thought they were going to be a joke last year, and everyone told me too. Everyone warned me when I was talking about this. Like, Jonathan Gannon's going to come in, he's going to coach hard, he's going to try to win with Kyler Murray, and I was just like, yeah, okay. Caleb Williams is there. They're going to tank. They're going to trade Kyler Murray, and they're going to start over with the rookie quarterback. Not the case. Yeah. And rightfully so. This team looks awesome. And like one of the 4 or 5 probably most enjoyable teams to watch in the NFL. Like actually fun watch, which who would have thought we'd say that about the Cardinals this soon?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's great too, because it's like, you can see what they're becoming, and that they're not quite there yet too. You know what I mean? Like that they're going to keep getting better.
A lot of good teams in the lightning round this week, but good teams playing bad teams, or in this case, 2 bad teams playing each other. The Bears lost to the Patriots 19-3. A lot of not fun stats from Matt Eberflus. First time in back-to-back games that the Bears have not scored a touchdown in Bears history in 20 years. First time since 1993 that the quarterback has been sacked 6 or more times in 2 weeks. I don't know what else to say. I think it's a combination of 2 things. Caleb's not getting the ball out necessarily on time, which is true of a lot of rookies, but he can't get the ball out on time because the offensive line is totally banged up. And because the offensive line's totally banged up, he can't get the ball out on time. And we do this whole little like whirlwind cycle. And because of that, you're not throwing the ball downfield. You're not developing the offense. You're not getting your playmakers involved. And it becomes this whirlwind of like, listen, I think Shane Waldron's good at his job. I think Matt Eberflus struggles in certain game management situations, but is good at calling a defense. Like, this team should be better than they are.
I love Shane Waldron as an offensive coordinator. I will say this, like, the one thing with him is he hasn't really coached a rookie quarterback. Like, he oversaw a reclamation project in Seattle, in working with Geno Smith. Had Russell Wilson before that, and then before that, he was with Jared Goff in Los Angeles with McVay. This is a different deal, Like, this is a different deal, like, kind of working with a quarterback from the ground up. And the one thing that's alarming, like, now Caleb took 9 sacks, and so obviously the offensive line's an issue, but not all of those sacks were like the offensive line being a sieve. Like, there were sacks where he was standing back there, and it looked like you'd almost see the wheels in his head turning. Like, he wasn't seeing it right, and like you wonder where he's at developmentally, and how the guys upstairs, the McCaskies, Kevin Warren, are going to look at this now. It hasn't been the McCaskies' way. I've said this over and over, to make a midseason coaching change, but. This is the way it is when, an existing head coach or even a new head coach has a quarterback drafted that high, is that ownership is going to be hypersensitive to his development, as they should be. And, decisions going forward have to be made on, and it's not just about one person, but a lot of it is like what's best for Caleb Williams. And so I think that's the case that Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron have to make the rest of the year, is that they are what's best for Caleb Williams going forward.
Do you think, I was stunned that
no touchdown since the Hail Mary. Isn't that crazy?
No touchdown since the Hail Mary. I was surprised, and I think
thanks, Tyreek Stevenson.
Right. I think I'm surprised that we've gotten to this point, but I guess I shouldn't. Moose Johnson, I think, was in the booth for the Bears game this weekend, and third quarter, they're just talking about an in-season coach firing, like it's like we're discussing lawn seed. They're just like, yeah, you just fire the coach. And I will say this, the Bears are interesting because, I
think the hard thing about it is like Eberflus has done a lot of good. You know what I mean? Like that was a mess that he and Ryan Poles inherited, and that, the defense is still really good, and they've done a lot to get a lot of the elements of it right. But this is his second offensive coordinator hire. If that doesn't work out, it's just the big picture questions don't relate so much to what Matt Eberflus and his staff and Ryan Poles and his staff have been able to build. I think a lot of it relates to just that, again, that single thing, like what's best for the quarterback that you drafted first overall.
Yeah. I don't see a path. The Bears have the hardest strength of schedule in the NFL from here on out. It's brutal. I don't know if you can win without an offensive line. And I don't know if you can go into next season with the same head coach. But, I everyone that thinks that the solution is to bust it up 3/4 of the way through the season so that your special teams coordinator can take it. Now, I will say this, the Bears have some good guys with head coaching pedigree on their staff. Thomas Brown has gotten head coaching interviews. Hightower, their special teams coordinator, is really well thought of. Those are guys that, have impressed people in the past. But is that the avenue? I don't think so, because here's what's going to happen. Look what's going on in New Orleans. You're going to have the special teams coordinator get hot, or your passing game coordinator get hot, and then, maybe make it so you want the job or don't want the job, and it creates this ambiguity. It's like, let's just, you would need a clean slate, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think one of the, I think it's where I think you have to take the temperature for the team right now is, and this is like I think this is like the fairest criticism of where they are, is like, I think like situations like the one in Washington 2 weeks ago, like really create a crossroads for a team and a coach, right? And it's like after going through something like that, like, because that's like a black eye, right? Yeah. So after you took that punch, like how are you going to respond to it? And it's been about as bad as you can you could possibly imagine, right? They rolled over against Arizona and they lost to one of the worst teams in the league in New England, right? Like, so how do you rectify that? Like, if you're Matt Eberflus, I think just the energy and the look of the team, not to be superficial about it, but the energy and the look of the team going into this week. I don't even know, who do they have this week?
The Bears have.
Just because I know it's great podcasting when we're Googling schedules.
I know. I've been so
this is what
good.
The people want. This is what the people want.
This is what the people want. So the Bears have
Packers.
Oh, you beat me to it. Packers, Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, Packers to the end of the season.
Packers off a bye too, right? The Packers didn't play this week.
Yeah. Good luck with that, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah, I think the level of engagement is worth monitoring. Again, not to be superficial about it. God, the Lions on Thanksgiving too.
Not what you want. Remember when you used to want the Lions on Thanksgiving? Now you're like, crap, I have the Lions on Thanksgiving.
Now you want the Cowboys, and now you want the Cowboys on Thanksgiving.
Now you want the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Perfect segue. The Cowboys just got demolished by the Eagles, and we're at the point now where
this is Jerry's nightmare because they're like not even entertaining anymore.
No. 34-6 was the final here. The Eagles are 7-2, by the way.
I know. Which is so funny because we were talking about them like they were terrible like 3 weeks ago.
It's so funny. They're 7-2. And
I'm telling you, the NFC East. This is like one of my things that I'm most proud of that I came up with this season is I think the NFC East is like the SEC.
yeah.
Where all the expectations are out of whack and every coach needs to be fired immediately, and like the NFC East is the SEC.
Can we just let Nick Sirianni do his job and just, you know what I mean? Like,
Will you just leave him alone?
can we just let him take his kids to the podium? Can we just let him and I loved let's go back 4 weeks ago when everyone's all the vultures are circling.
Just let Nick Sirianni do his job.
I mean, the guy has done nothing but good things. And okay, that there was a back end of the season losing streak last year after you started the season really well, precipitated by some injuries and some sour grapes, which he couldn't coach out of them. But in reality was a problem with your coordinators, which you fixed in the offseason. Like, think about it. The Eagles were cycling through Brian Johnson, Sean Desai, Matt Patricia, like all these guys and trying to juggle this in the middle of the season to fix it.
He lost his bet, so he inherited a 4-12 team, made the playoffs his first year, went to the Super Bowl his second year, loses both his coordinators, right?
Still makes the playoffs last year. Still makes the playoffs.
And he comes into this season like he's walking the Green Mile.
It's insane. And then he brings his kids to the podium, which is like a cool thing because as a coach, you never get to see your family anyway.
What are they saying on WIP this morning? Are they still calling for his head?
Yeah, we got Rico from Fishtown, and he's talking about Bill Belichick coming here. It's like, come on, guys.
Rico from Fishtown.
Seamus from Kensington. I mean, like
you do a pretty good accent. That was pretty good.
I mean, I was Scranton
like
accent Scranton accent and the Philly accent are kind of hybrids of each other. They're sort of like inverse. I can slip into it sometimes, right? You talk about getting a hoagie, and but you don't want to do that. But like let
Philly
him go.
And Baltimore are underrated, annoying accents, and trust me, I come from the capital of annoying accents, so I know one when I see one. Philly and Baltimore are underrated, annoying accents.
But I will always say, this is lightning round, so I got to move on. But the Boston accent's a choice. I've always said this to
I don't have
people.
Nobody
you don't
I
have
grew up with has it.
Because you chose not to. I went to school with kids from what's like a leafy suburb 30 miles from Boston?
Where I grew, Sudbury.
So, okay, yeah.
I grew up in
went
Sudbury,
to college.
Lexington, Concord, Winchester, Weston, Wayland.
Yeah.
Dover, Sherburne, Wellesley. Yeah.
I went to college with those kids.
If you come from those places, if you have an accent, you're an outlier.
Well, you're faking it. It's a choice. That's what I'm saying. And I went to school with these kids and, you'd hear them give a presentation in class and they'd sound like Bill Gates.
Yeah,
and then on the weekend, when you're trying to get, attention and look interesting, all of a sudden you sound like all the cops from The Departed. Like it's not, it's a choice. And
I don't know if it's a choice. If you're from Revere, it's not a choice. If you're from Everett, it's not a choice. If you're from Southie or Quincy or Braintree, that's not a choice. Even where I'm at now, I live in the South Shore suburbs, which those you see it a little bit more often. The thing about the suburbs where I'm from, the west suburbs, is nobody's actually from Boston. Everybody's parents are from somewhere else. Those communities, everybody people parachute in there for 20 years for the schools so their kids can go to schools and then leave.
But I grew up with a Scranton accent, and you know where I left it? In Scranton. The minute I moved out, and so can you. So, all right, let's go here. What do we got left?
Off track. We're way off track, huh?
Way off track. Vikings, Jaguars. I don't know what to say in this one. My two immediate takes are this was one of the worst, I think statistically the worst offensive performance of a Doug Peterson coached team ever, but you had Mac Jones. I mean, this team is circling the drain at this point. And we talked about...
What about the Trayvon Walker thing, too? Do we have to hit that?
Yeah.
Walk
everyone through this.
Seen?
Yeah. Huh? Walk everyone through this.
So it's the end of the game. The Jaguars are going to get the ball back. I can't remember if it was a third down, whatever it was, but the Jaguars are going to get the ball back. And there are some pushing and shoving at the end of the play. And Trayvon Walker basically, the former number 1 overall pick, basically slams someone to the ground, draws a flag, and that's that. And that's that. And the Vikings kneel it out and win the game. So there's so many signs of this being like the end, of a regime. And that was another one where you see that sort of thing happening at the end of the game. And I don't know, this is going to be an interesting hiring cycle, I think, in general. Connor, you got a lot of stuff coming up on it. I think that one, I've said this a few different places, might be the one that best fits Bill Belichick. But yeah, the whole operation there. Now Mac Jones is their quarterback. I would say that they're very likely to be drafting near the very top with a new coach and GM pulling the trigger, and maybe that new coach and GM is the same person, and maybe that person is somebody who has about 7 different media gigs and is settling all scores publicly now.
From Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson to Bill Belichick, the 2025
that is quite a lineage, huh?
Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going to fix it this time. Vikings, listen, I don't understand why Sam Darnold's not allowed to be bad. Like Jared Goff is allowed to throw 5 picks and we're just going to not bat an eye at it. Sam Darnold throws 3 picks in a game and all of a sudden it's an indictment.
Over.
He's bad just like he was with the Jets. Like, all right, move on. This is the lightning round, but like if you have that take today, you're an idiot. I'm just, whatever. Giants Panthers. I mean,
we shouldn't trust Kevin O'Connell to work it out. All right, I'm done. Go to Giants Panthers
for serious. Giants Panthers. It should be illegal for an international game to go to overtime, especially if both of those teams have a combined 4 wins. And we got what we bargained for, because as soon as the Giants got into overtime, they fumbled the ball and handed the game off to the Panthers. And also, I'm just going to say this. I've been in Bryce Young's corner since the beginning. I staked out my position when everyone was like, the draft is over. The Texans won. The Panthers should have taken this guy. No. Both of these quarterbacks are good. If the Texans took Bryce Young would be CJ Stroud with some little differences. And now we're seeing this guy. I'm standing on that take. I'm standing on it. You can't get me off that island.
CJ is kind of a unique talent. Now, CJ, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to taking all of these hits. Because
Bryce Young is dialing it up with Jalen Coker from Holy Cross right now, Albert. Holy Cross!
All right, so I think the Panthers stick with Bryce Young the rest of the year.
They're going to keep pounding.
Get your answer, but they're playing better. And I think you got to give Dave Canales credit for not losing that team. It very easily could have happened.
Brad Idzik's done a nice job with this group. Yeah. Youngest offensive coordinator in the league. This is a lot of arrows pointing up right now.
Yep, and they have Vizuro, of course, on D. What are we doing with the Giants?
I don't know.
I mean, I'd assume. So they have their bye now. I'm guessing Drew Lock's going to be the quarterback coming out of the bye.
Let's go.
Oh, is this another guy you're in on?
Well, I predicted my 100 bold predictions for the start of the season. I said that Drew Lock would take a majority of the snaps.
But they almost.
But I don't think he can do that yet.
They almost have to go to him now, right?
I mean, you could go to Tommy DeVito.
Well, no, because of the contract, you almost have to go to him.
Right.
I think, right? So that means if this is it for him, right? So, and you're going to Drew Lock, then that means that you spent $82 million for 16 starts and more interceptions than picks over 2 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy. When there were these reclamation projects available. And it's going to be so interesting to see how maybe some of this stuff corrects itself, because the quarterback, the financials for quarterbacks are so all over the place. And I think you have these guys who are distressed assets out there, like your Darnolds, like your Mayfields, that you can go and scoop up. And the thing is, I'll fall on the sword for this one. I had it wrong. I thought the Giants were going to be super competitive this year.
Me too.
I still think there's a really good infrastructure in place there. I still think Dexter Lawrence, my exec poll last week, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, Connor. But my exact mid-season awards, you know who the defensive player of the year was?
Dexter Lawrence.
Dexter Lawrence.
Wow.
And so you have Dexter Lawrence, you have Brian Burns, you have Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, Deontay Banks is like, I don't know if he's a lost cause. He's still talented, though. You know, on offense, you have Malik Neighbors and Andrew Thomas and at least some pieces, you know, like where you look at it and say, okay, like the premium positions are sort of addressed outside of quarterback. And so it's not like the hard part's sort of done, you know? Like I feel like Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have kind of taken care of the hard part of the team building thing. I don't know. I mean, I would just say this. Like, I hope Brian Daboll can just stay level through the rest of the year because I think he deserves a fourth year.
I do too.
I think he's a really good head coach. I think the pressure of being in New York can get to people. I don't think the Maras, and I think you're with me on this, right? The Maras didn't want to get rid of Joe Judge in 2020.
No.
And then that press conference happened, and it was like, and that was over, you know, in 2021. That press conference happened, and it is over. And so, like, being in New York under that spotlight, people calling for your jobs can do a number on people. And I would just say, like, I hope Brian Daboll can just keep his cool through this because it's gotten other people. And Dave's a great guy, but, like, he can be a little hot-tempered. And so I would hope that he can manage all of that for the next couple of months. And because I think that they are not that far off from being a really good team. God, wouldn't that be great if it was Sam Darnold who led the Giants back to glory next year?
Now we're talking.
There you go. Instead of Sam Darnold and Josh McCown going back to the Jets, it's Sam Darnold going back to New York, but not to the Jets, to the Giants.
All right, we've arrived at the last team at the end of this extra long show, but that's good because you know what? I heard from some people. I mean, producer Shelby's going to be mad at us, but I heard from some people that said, "Hey, Conor and Albert, don't be in a hurry to get out of here." I like hearing.
They like hanging out with us.
So you know what? It is what it is. Chargers and Titans. It's actually a pretty decent Will Levis game out of nowhere. However, really doesn't matter. I mean, the Chargers won 27-17. Levis had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 127 quarterback rating. The Titans, you know, they ran the ball for 132 yards, but it just doesn't matter. Like this Chargers team they're road graders.
And the Titans are going to be all right. Like I think they're playing better. Like the Chargers are a better team. We know that. Like I think the Titans have actually played okay the last couple of weeks. There's some progress being made there. Like I think Brian Callahan's a really like a qualified guy, you know, and whether or not he's gonna be a great head coach, we'll see. But I think a lot of people sold too early on him, where they're like, "Oh, like this looks like a poorly coached team." Well, you know, he inherited some things that he had to clean up, and so like I think, I think the Titans are coming along. One of my favorite things now is to watch the Jim Harbaugh post game locker room scene. It was another classic again. Like last week, it was like he gave game balls to like 23 different guys, right? and this week he gave a game ball to John Spanos, to Joe Ortiz, and then forced Justin Herbert, who doesn't like speaking in front of everybody, to address the entire team.
Excellent job.
It was awesome. I mean, his post-game locker room speeches. Oh, and then he did the high five thing too. Where he goes, like all of a sudden in the middle of his post-game speech, all right, everybody giving each other high fives. And then the whole locker room's giving each other high fives.
I think the secret to being an NFL head coach is to just be off your rocker. Like if you...
Well, I think you have to be a little off.
Yeah, because like every sane person that I've met that has had that job has flamed out. And every just complete nut bar is a good coach. And that's what it is. Like, you know, that's all, you know, and I don't know. We all need a little Harbaugh in our lives. We need a little Harbaugh in our lives. We need a little Dan Campbell in our lives.
But you know what's great about like when he gives game balls too? You can tell it's like off the top of his head.
Oh, yeah. Just like,
you know, like some guys come in with like the note card or whatever. You know what I mean? Like Jim Harbaugh is just like just naming people.
You know, there's like an inside linebacker who had like 19 tackles. It's like, what the shit? Am I never going to get like a...
Just forgot.
He just gave one to John Spanos.
Jim has no idea he did it, and that linebacker is going to spend the entire week stewing and getting mad, and then he's going to play his nuts off again the next week.
Chess, not checkers, baby. All right, gang. Well, thank you so much, as always, for coming to hang out with us. This is truly one of the great joys of my week, hanging out with Albert, talking football, communicating with you. Leave us ratings and reviews, guys. It helps other people find the show. It helps us get better at what we do. And we have Matt and Gilberto coming up Thursday. And let us know, who did Albert get Wally pipped by Gilberto or not? This was a big show for Albert.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is my big comeback.
Reclaim everything after celebrating Ohio State's win over Penn State too hard last week, which I'm guessing was the
Yeah. I actually went to my first NFL game as a fan in probably 20 years. I took my 10-year-old to Arrowhead for the Monday night game.
Wow.
Thanks to the Chiefs for their hospitality. It was awesome. It was so strange being in the stands. It was weird having a beer in my hand, like that was really strange. But what a great experience. What an awesome environment. And obviously my kid was over the moon to be there. So it was really cool. And thank you to Gilberto for filling in so I could do that. And maybe, who knows, maybe replacing me. Maybe I did get Wally pipped.
I don't know. We will let the public decide. I could get replaced. Albert could get replaced. In 10 years, the MMQB
podcast. Bill Parcells said, we're all just grains of sand on the beach.
That's it. In 2 years, this podcast could be hosted by 2 Peloton instructors. We just don't know. But hopefully it's still me and Albert. Thanks, guys.
I could say which ones I'm a fan of, but I'll keep that to myself here.
That's for a different show. All right, guys. See you next week.